Hi everyone, my name is Christine here with Oxygen Farm Quilts, and I would like to thank you for joining me today. Today I am going to give you a complete, detailed, step-by-step tutorial on how I create the Walking Trails quilt. Here we go. For this quilt, I am going to use 2 of these small jelly rolls. There are 20 strips with 10 designs, 2 of each of those designs. So it's 40 jelly roll strips. And then I'm going to use my red yardage. So let me get my red yardage cut up into 2.5 inch strips. And one thing to remember is you can use whatever size strip you want for this quilt block. It doesn't have to be 2.5 inch strips. So, but that's what I'm using for this tutorial today, and I'll show you the construction of it. I have ironed my red yardage, and a little tip, after you iron it, make sure that on the fold you have a really nice crease, and I line that up with a line on my mat. The edges, those can be kind of wavy, but it still serves as a good guide for lining up this side for cutting your strips. What we're trying to avoid is having it be crooked and then you got a elbow or a curve in your cut strip. So I kind of just take the edges like that to give me a guide, but then I'm coming back down on this side and I'm making sure that that is as straight as possible. If it seems like it's a little off, then I just kind of hold it right here and I just kind of go up. So I'm just looking at a line on my mat and just trying to get them as straight as possible. Just try to do the best that you can in making those straight. Now I love to use this Stripology ruler because it just makes it super fast. So I have my strips that I have cut, and I have my strips from my jelly roll. So when you have a jelly roll strip, most of the time they have these pinked edges to prevent the roll from fraying. So when you have your strips that you have cut, they have, of course, a straight edge. So most of the time I have found that when you have your 2.5 inch strips compared to a jelly roll strip, the jelly roll with those pinked edges are always going to be a little bit larger. So most of the time it is in the valley of those pinked edges is actually the 2.5 inch, because since this is going to be a strip set, if I went all the way to this side and then sewed, I'm going to have quite a bit on this side, and it may mess with the entire width of your strip set. It's not that big of a deal. I am just pointing it out. To whichever way you choose to sew it, just be sure that you are consistent throughout your entire strip sets as you're sewing. I love all the different ways you can lay out this strip set for this block. So if I just had 2 colors, my strip set would look like this. And remember, whatever the 2 outside colors are, that's going to be that main diamond that weaves through the pattern. So that's what it would look like if I did just 2 colors in the quilt. I could also add my 3rd color and have the blue in the middle, or I could put my red in the middle and have my blue on the outside. And like I said, whatever the outside strip is where you're going to get that big weaving going through the the quilt pattern. That's what I like to call the walking trail. It's like, it just goes all these different ways. But for this particular one, I'm going to try something different that I haven't tried before. I've tried where I did or on a Halloween one here where I did little white strips in between. That was fun to do that. In these jelly rolls, there's only 3 different, what I would consider my lights. That's it. So I'm going to put my light in the middle, have my blues be on the outside, and my reds be what I would consider my 2nd and my 4th spot. So my blues are going to be number 1 and number 5. My reds are going to be number 2 and number 4. And my white light colors are going to be number 3 in the middle. One of my daughters pointed out that in her daughter's Walking Trails quilt, the way it comes together, it looks like a heart. So I can't wait to see with the red being in that position to really see if that red heart stands out. So this is how I'm going to do it. Another thing I'm going to point out is all my red fabrics are the same, but my blues are different. I can keep 2 of the same color together with these blues, but I really want to keep things scrappy. So I'm probably going to swap those out so that as it's weaving through the walking trail, it's gonna be super scrappy. Okay, so here are my numbers for this quilt. There were 40 strips in my jelly roll, and I had something happen to me that has never happened before. There was a bonus strip in there, but it didn't work out for my quilting math to use it. So bonus strip. So I'll put that aside. And then when I was checking my video in the process of making this tutorial, this one here was really reading as more of a medium to me. So with the way I figured up my how many strip sets I'm going to need, I don't need these. I think there's 4 strips there. So I have 12 of my white, I'm just calling those my white strips, 12 of my white strips, and then 24 blues and 24 of my reds. So that should give me 12 strip sets. So out of each strip set, I should be able to get 4 squares out of each width of fabric strip. So, and it takes 2 squares to make 1 block, and you'll see all that here in just a moment. So it looks like I should be able to lay out my blocks 4 across by 6 down without having any blocks left over, but we'll get into that here in just a little bit. All right, I'm going to be sewing my strip sets together. So I'm going to do the 2 outside colors first. I like to keep the one that I cut on top because it's easier for me to see those pinked edges when they're underneath against my white table. I'm using the fabric that I cut as my guide for stitching. So when I sew strips together, I like to get it locked in with my presser foot down. Lay the top strip on top of the bottom one. I can see these edges peeking out pretty good. I'm not going to pull on them. I'm not pulling it like this at all. I'm just keeping it smooth and letting my feed dogs pull it through. Once I've gone that length, I readjust again, smooth things out. Another thing that helps too is I like to keep my left hand over here, and it kind of prevents so that it doesn't like sway or move around at all. You'll notice this sometimes when you're dealing with a jelly roll and yardage. So I have never sewn two different kinds of strips together without them coming out uneven. This always happens. It's not a big deal at all. I'm just letting you know that that can happen because especially with some yardage, that could be 42 inches, it could be 44 inches. I believe this one is probably 44 and the jelly roll strip is probably 42. So it's not a big deal. You'll still have plenty. Now I pick up my two outside red and blue ones instead of my middle and my red, because I always know on this particular way that I'm laying this strip set out, I always know my white's going to be in the middle, so it won't get me all mixed up, because if I don't, I will get it mixed up. Okay, when dealing with strip sets, I like to do the piano pressing method. I don't know if that's what it's called. That's what I'm calling it. Piano pressing. So I like to take the iron and go over my strip. Try to keep it as straight as possible. And then on this particular grouping, I'm going to be pressing everything to the red. I can't think if it really matters, but it's just consistency for me as I'm going through all of them. I'll just press all my seams on the red side. So after I do that, it heats up the fabrics, which make them not as stiff. So then I go along and I just kind of smooth it with my fingers there a little bit without trying to push it. Once I feel that it's completely open, I take my iron and you can see I'm not pushing, I'm not pushing with my iron. I have a tendency to push too hard and then it gives you that bow and then things are all crooked. So I just like to kind of take my hands, make sure that I don't have any gap in here. Just keep it straight. And that seems to be pretty straight. It may not be, but it's good enough. It's good enough for me. Okay, I went ahead and sewed my next grouping together, and then I have the two that I ironed. And I have my two sets, my two red and blue sets. I will go ahead and find where that comes together. Where are you? Right there. And then they're already together with that stitching. Then I will just take the white one that goes with it and then just put a pin in it. So then this whole grouping will go to the iron and I'll keep it together. So that way I can just sew all these together and then go iron and come back. You do it however works for you. This is just some of the different ways that I do it. Just kind of depends on my mood. So here I will go ahead and just pick one of the sides. And again, with the white has the pinked edges on it, I will flip it around like that. Also, this is that longer side. This kind of lets me know that I came from this way and stitched down. So if you stitch a bunch of strips together in the same way, your strip set can kind of have a tendency to bow a little bit. So this is a good indicator that I am starting on the other end. And I'm starting down where this one is because I know that those two are about the same length. Okay, so I have some of my strip sets all sewn together. And so let's talk about cutting these strips into blocks. Typically, however wide your strip set is. So with 5 2.5-inch strips sewn together, my strip set should be 10.5 inches wide this way. So mine is only coming in at 10.25. I typically have a really fat seam allowance. I don't know why, I just do. But so if you have a scant or a narrow seam allowance, yours would probably come out at 10.5 inches. But let me talk to you a little bit about that. So if you are using a jelly roll, this particular jelly roll, these strips were only 42 inches wide. And so I have them lined up on my mat here. Here is 0, here is 42. So you can see that even with me trying to keep my blues as even as possible as I'm sewing them, it doesn't always turn out that way. Some of them are coming in right at 42 inches. If you take 10.5 times 4, that's 42 inches. So that gives me no room for error in my cutting in order to get 4 squares out of each strip set. Now, it's not imperative for you to get 4 out of each strip set. For me it is, because in my math, I need an exact number out of these strip sets. So I didn't allow myself any room for error on my blocks. So if your strip set is 10.5 inches wide this way, then you want to cut your blocks into 10.5-inch squares. So what I suggest is, after you have a few strip sets made, before you decide whether or not you're going to cut your strips or your squares into 10 inches or 10.5 inches, is to take measurements of a few of them just to make sure. And then of course, again, make sure you consider the length and how many strip sets you have so that you don't come up short. I've made this pattern a bunch of times, and with me knowing that I have a fat seam allowance, and mine always come in like, it's always like 10.25. It just, I don't know why. So what I always do that gives me peace and comfort is I just cut my squares into 10-inch squares. And so I'm going to bring the camera closer so I can show you how I keep my squares straight with my lines. Okay, so I go by the middle strip set for lining up to make sure my squares are going to be straight and not be wonky. I use the number 4 line on my ruler and the number 6 line, and I get them as close as I can. And then I'm making mine at 10 inches, so I come over as far as I can on this side, taking into account there will be the selvages cut off. I want to make sure to get those cut off. But in the next step, they'll be buried in a seam allowance anyway. So if you need it for length, go ahead and you could include a little bit of those. So when doing it, cutting at 10 inches, I will be cutting off a little bit from the top and a little bit from the bottom as well. So I like to use my hand weights to make sure that things don't slide. This ruler has grippies on it, but I just like to be sure. And another thing to look is you can also look at your 2-inch line and your 8-inch line and kind of make sure those are straight. But this block is pretty forgiving, so don't stress out about it. See, I'm just cutting a little bit off of there. And I'll take that, line this back up again. So this side makes it a little bit easier because I'm lining this side up at 10. My 4-inch and 6-inch are still helpful this way. If you have the Stripology or one of these groove rulers, it also works well for cutting these. You can get 2 blocks cut. So I just choose any number or any line to line up on that center strip. Make sure it's not moving. And then cut it 10 inches. I just go to 10 and 20. And that gets me to this way. And then I just turn it. So I'm just using, let's say 14 and 16 to line up, because I want to make sure that I'm cutting the same amount off on the ends. So that's why I always go by the middle strip here. Make sure I'm good. See, just little bits. With this block, there are two different ways that you can cut your squares. So I am making mine scrappy, and so I have two different blues and two different white centers here. So one is vertical. I'm going to turn the other one horizontal, flip it over, and I'm going to take this over to my machine and sew 1/4 of an inch all the way around all four sides. Okay, here's my squares. And this part is always so fun to me because you just never know what it's going to end up looking like. So what I'm doing is I'm using my long ruler and I'm placing it corner to corner, and I am crossing at where my stitch lines come together. That's where I am lining up. So I will just cut corner. To corner. There we go. Okay. And then it's like a little surprise gift. Now these are stretchy, so don't, like when you take them to your iron, don't like, you know, push them open like that. They're on the bias. They are stretchy, but it's okay. There and there. So I'm just going to finger press these, and then I'm going to show you the different layouts with just these two, but then I'm going to show you the second way that you can make this one larger block. Here we go. If we were to put these back together, that is what it would look like. If I wanted, I can use the two outside ones, flip it around. So then you get that shape. If I flip it to the other two, it just goes back to that same stripe like what it looked like before. So then let's do this, and then I'm going to flip these two again. So I'm looking to put these, the little white triangles, all in the center. And see what that's doing? Has that beautiful white center with the red and the blue. Oh. Here is method 2 for cutting the blocks. So I have two separate squares, and I'm just cutting these first before I would sew them together. So I'm just going corner to corner. Cut. And then when you have a long ruler like this, if I just picked it up, it's going to pull the fabric up with me. So it helps to grab it back here and kind of pull up one side and then the other, and then your fabric The static electricity will not take that fabric up with you or with the ruler. So here, just lining up corner to corner again. And I'm going to do this one right here. Okay, so after they've been cut, I have these pieces here. You need two squares to make the one block. So if I wanted to make this same pattern here, I'm going to move this one out. Bring my white triangles into the center. And then I am going to take my ones that have the white long center there like that. So there you can see that block. Let me scoot everything down so I can make sure that you are able to see everything. And then I want to show you also why it's good to have both of these methods in making a quilt. So I'm going to turn this one so it looks like this one to you. Let's take a look at these blues here. Say this one and this one were the same, and I was like, boy, I don't want them to be together. So what's nice about having your individual sections here is if I wanted, I could pull this one out here and move all of this one over here. Or maybe I only want to move part of one over here. Maybe I don't want this one to be the same here. So then I could pull one over here. Let's do that. Well, that's the same triangle there. But I think you get the point that I'm trying to make is that the big blocks are super fun and super fast, especially when you're dealing with just like 3 color or 2 colors. But if you're dealing with a lot of colors and you're like, boy, I'm having 2 colors by each other, I don't want to do that. You can reserve some of your blocks and do them individually like this. Let's go ahead and turn this so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to put this back over here. So remember, to make one mini square, you're always going to have a long one and then the one that have all 5 fabrics in there, okay? Let's go ahead and turn this one here. So when you start putting them together, you can see where you start getting that walking trail pattern right there. Just super cool. Now this one here, let's go, I'm gonna go ahead and pull from here so you can see what happens over here. So like when this block is next to it, then this is what's gonna happen when you have that next row. So then you get that X there. And this is the reason, if you can see it, when these are sewn together, this is the reason why I did the red in my 2nd and my 4th spots, is because see this? When this is sewn together, I think it looks like a little heart. I think it's so cool. When sewing your large block together like a 4-patch, you will have these seams here. So I like to just push my top one up and have my bottom one stay down. Once I get past that seam, then I do the same on the bottom. But with that, since the top one is already going that way, I turn my bottom one down. When I do my seams, I love it when my top seam is pointing towards the needle and the bottom seam is pointing towards me. Sometimes I'll come through and snip this little piece off just to get it out of the way. Then line it up down there. Bring this one over. Do the same thing. Make that one go up, that one go down. When I nest my seams in that manner, I get really good points. Where those seams come together, that looks super nice. So then fold it over, and I will have those same connections down this way. I wanted to talk real quick too about ironing, sewing and ironing when you're dealing with this block, because you are dealing with bias. So those that are new to quilting and sewing, bias is when your fabric is cut at an angle and it makes it super stretchy. So it can be very scary for some people, but I just try to treat the fabric very gently. Instead of having my iron like push it around, I just kind of do it just very nice and easy. So you see where I was ironing to get my fabrics nice and warm and floppy. And then, like I talk about, by playing piano with your fabric. So I am using my fingers to kind of press my seams open, and it prevents them from getting all stretched and distorted. And if you do find that your fabric's stretched, a really hot iron, and then maybe some steam, either from your iron, or I use a bottle like that to get some water on there, and just kind of be nice and gentle with it. When it's all quilted and stuff, it's going to turn out so nice, and you don't have to worry about bias. Bias can be our friend sometimes. But look at that block. How lovely. Beautiful. Okay, I have the red binding made that I'm going to use for my quilt. And I cut up the rest of the fabric from that red fabric that I had in my stash. And I have 2 strips remaining. And I have this little bit. So I am going to have enough fabric to make a bonus project. So in the beginning, I didn't use these blues from the jelly roll, and there are a total of 4 of them. So I am going to put those on the outside edges. And then I had some white that I'm going to use for my alternating strips. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 2.5-inch strips, and I'm going to be able to make 2 strip sets out of this to make my bonus project. Okay, I have this strip set done, and this one still 10 1/4. I don't know. So anyway, my length is 42 inches, 43 kinda. So it does, again, work better for me to cut my squares at 10 inches. And like I said before, if yours are at 10 1/2, then go for 10 1/2. I was able to get 8 squares out of my 2 strip sets. And when I have strip sets where all of the fabrics are the same, I prefer to do the sewing all the way around method instead of the cutting corner to corner method, because it's not going to make a difference on the pattern. So one is horizontal, then I turn one vertically, place them right sides together. I'll put a couple pins in, and then I will sew 1/4 inch all the way around. I have all of my squares cut, so that gives me 16 of these squares. So let's have some fun with the layout. So if we lay it out like how it comes after it's open, it does like this long rectangle here. Let's scoot that up. Let's do that again. Let's see. What's fun is these are all the same. So I can just kind of play around with it here. I'm just trying to make all of these go the same down. Let's see, so that would be there. Continue that one on. So it looks like it kind of twists around here, winds around there. So let's go ahead and do where we make the big X's in the middle. And I'm doing a square shape here, so that's different than what I normally do. I normally do a long runner, so it's kind of fun to switch it around into this square shape. So we're doing the X in the middle of each 4 patch, and then that does that circly diamond in the middle. Boy, that's really pretty as more of a table topper. If you have like a square table or a rectangle table, and depending on your fabrics, that'd be pretty cool if you had a border on it and hung it on the wall for a wall hanging, or this would be an adorable baby quilt size. Just add some borders to it. That's cute. I like that in that square shape. Okay, so let's flip around. And this one is my favorite. This is my traditional Walking Trails pattern here. I'm moving just all my tiny triangles to the center here. That's what's nice when you have all the fabrics the same. You can just play around with the layouts and not have to worry about, you know, having two of the same fabrics by each other. So I love this one. It does the X in the middle. Imagine this as a table topper. You got, you know, pretty decoration in there. And then to do a traditional table runner, let's see, I did this side wrong. Okay. So there, you're still getting that walking trail weave in there, but you have an X in the middle. And then my favorite is this one. I think it just looks like you did a whole bunch of little piecing. But you didn't. You just did strip piecing, which is so beautiful. It's such a dramatic block and pattern that is just lovely. And like I say, I'm not a pattern writer. I just played around with this, and so hopefully this tutorial is helpful. That's my favorite. Oh, that's so beautiful. And here is my bonus project. Yay! I hope you have enjoyed my tutorial on the Walking Trails quilt. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.